Hey guys, Sean here, and welcome to the F1 Word Live and the German Grand Prix race debrief. What a Grand Prix! I still can't get over it. If you didn't catch the watch along, we did 2.5 hours worth of coverage and just about hanging on to my voice. It kind of tailed off a little bit, but it really did get going quite nicely. If you haven't seen the Grand Prix, of course, it goes without saying there will be massive spoilers in this one. Yes, I know it's ridiculous that I have to say that, but I kind of have to. I've been told off before for not letting people know there'd be spoilers in a race debrief. Work that one out. But it doesn't matter. Let's not get into that one. What did we reckon to the race? I thoroughly enjoyed that. Like I say, tailed off a little bit, but then we got something just to sprinkle things and make it a bit more interesting, and it really did spice up that Grand Prix. Everyone seems very happy. There's a little bit of controversy, which of course, with it being the race debrief, we will be talking about in just a moment, and I will be joined, as ever, by Jonty. And for the first time, as it kind of gives away on screen there, by Chamber F1. So very excited for that one. I think most of you are probably here for him, if you're being honest, but I'll not take it to heart. It's fine. Let's have a quick look then at the race result. Obviously, tomorrow there'll be the proper race review, so I can go over this in more detail then. But Lewis Hamilton did take victory from teammate Valtteri Bottas. Kimi Raikkonen came home in third place from Max Verstappen in fourth. Nico Hulkenberg, great result for him. Best of the season, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's his best result so far this year. P5 for him, took full advantage of everything that went for him there. Romain Grosjean, really good recovery actually in the end. That doesn't tell the full story there. P6, Perez 7th, Ocon in 8th place. Really good drive from Ocon. Some solid points there as well for Force India in that battle for maybe fourth. I think they could be in that battle for fourth if they keep going. Marcus Ericsson, Discord over the moon, I'm sure, with 2 points on the board for Sauber. And Brendan Hartley took 10th place and a point for Toro Rosso. Great for him. He's another one that really did need that. Kevin Magnussen in P11. Carlos Sainz in 12th. Van Dorn recovered fairly well. What do you say? I mean, P13, McLaren still really nowhere, but he's got his issues at the moment. I'm sure we'll cover that at some point in this stream or later in the week. Pierre Gasly, P40. Not great for him. Took a penalty this morning with a full power unit change, which pushed him to the back of the grid. Charles Leclerc, very scruffy today, if we're being completely honest. He ended up 15th. Did try and make an early switch to Inters, which didn't work on, but we'll talk about the weather in just a few. Fernando Alonso, P16. Did actually retire towards the end of the race, I think. I might be wrong on that one, but it did say out on the, not this timing, but the official F1 website timing, so I assume he did. Lance Stroll retired. Sebastian Vettel crashed out. Sorokin had mechanical issues, as did his teammate. And Daniel Ricciardo, once again, out of the Grand Prix for Red Bull. A frustrating day, once again, for the Aussie. But in the end, Jonty, not actually a bad race, mate. Did you enjoy that one?
I very much enjoyed that one. Got a little bit worried, sort of around the first pit stops, but Mercedes did us a favour by doing nothing, which kind of amped up the excitement.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, everybody's typing F, but I've just realised what they're typing F2, so it's okay. I thought, oh God, the stream has crashed, but I think everything's fine, so that's okay. I mean, I don't quite know what to say here. I'm quite honoured that you're taking the time, Stuart, Mr. Chamber F1, to join us on this stream. Welcome to your first F1 Word Race debrief.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. Please don't be too honoured. I'm not that exciting.
Oh, based on the chat, I think they're all here for you if we're being sneaky about this one. But what did you reckon to that race? It was went a bit quiet, didn't it, midway through, but really did pick up very nicely in the end.
Yeah, it was another one of those races where it sort of wait for it, and then a bomb goes off and everything gets turned upside down, and we're all thrilled till the finish.
It was very exciting. I mean, if anybody, correct me if I'm wrong, you two, maybe you did make these predictions. I mean, you could tell me if you did, because I wouldn't know, but I don't think anybody ever predicted a Mercedes 1-2 today.
No, absolutely not. I certainly didn't, especially with Lewis's issues in qualifying. You know, he was going to be on for a podium, if we're honest, maybe fourth. But 1-2, no, that was never on the cards.
No, me neither. I mean, I did have Hamilton down as my winner when I made predictions on Friday, but after Saturday, not at all, especially when it seemed like Ferrari had been hiding quite a strong package for all of practice.
It's quite we'll talk about Vettel in a moment, but it's quite a big swing in both championships. But we were saying during the race watch along, Stuart, that this season is just ebbing and flowing. It's switching constantly, and even with Hamilton taking a 17-point lead to Hungary, this isn't over by a long way. This is going right down to the wire.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the graph of the lead of the championship, they're twirling around like ballerinas. I think I think it's clear now that Ferrari have the best package going forward. I'll be interested to see what Mercedes bring. But I sort of mentioned on Twitter during the race, this has been a season of people throwing results away more than anything.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it, actually, isn't it? I mean, I kind of want to talk about the race winner, but really the biggest talking point of the day, Jonty, if we're being honest, is probably Sebastian Vettel's retirement. And yes, wet, but I suppose really an unforced error.
You'd have to believe that. When you heard his reaction on the team radio, he sounded distraught. And we don't usually get that from Seb unless he knows it's his own mistake, which is really unfortunate to see, but everyone makes mistakes, even the very best.
It's frustrating, I think, for him, and it's very sad to hear on team radio, because this was very much Ferrari's weekend to lose. They turned up here with a lot more pace than I think anybody was expecting. They seem to have found some more power as well. So they are the team to beat this weekend and probably for the rest of the season. So to be in a controlled position like that, to basically be cruising to victory, if we're being honest, it looked like it was all done and dusted. You know, do we put it all down to the wet, Stuart, or maybe a lapse of concentration, or is it just first on the scene to those wet conditions, so makes the mistake?
It was a really interesting crash to me because it, as far as I could tell, and it wasn't entirely clear exactly where the rain was, but he'd moved away from the rainy patches, which were closer to the hairpin, and I don't know if they cooled down his tires. By the time he got to the stadium, it was a very funny little accident, very much like when Hamilton went off in China and in his debut season and got stuck in the gravel. It was a little bit pathetic, really. So I think changeable conditions. He just got caught out. It was clearly very sad, but from a neutral fan of the sport, keeps it interesting moving forwards.
Yeah, Jonty said that in the race watch along. He said, one thing we get out of this is, we've got a championship that's once again changed hands. But I think I get what you're saying about the accident. When I saw him in the wall, I thought he'd had a big spin and it was a big impact, and he just sort of skid off track into the wall, didn't he? It wasn't like a huge accident, but I was going to say you're never getting out of there, but I mean, obviously he's hit the wall, but Ericsson did all right yesterday, but obviously hitting that wall, you can't reverse out of there, and it's race over. But we talk about emotion quite a lot on this, Jonty, and how much it kind of affects drivers psychologically. Yesterday, Lewis Hamilton crouched down by his car, absolutely distraught. We're all talking about this is a season-defining moment, and then we get similar reactions from Sebastian Vettel. These guys put themselves under so much pressure, and it means so much to both of them, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, we know how close it is between them. As Stuart mentioned, the graph of the lead in the Drivers' Championship, it's just been backwards and forwards all season. So they know how close it is and how important every single result is. And for big things like this, for Vettel to come away with no points at all is such a massive, massive thing, especially when we're only one race from the mid-season break.
That's it. It's that, one more race to go before we get the 4-week break. But also, next weekend, Red Bull are probably one of, if not the favourites, because it's definitely a Red Bull track. So that's going to take more points away from one or two of the Ferraris or one or two of the Mercedes. So it's not going to be easy for Vettel to turn around before that summer break, unless we have yet another surprise mechanical issue or crash from Lewis Hamilton, I suppose.
Yeah, that could happen.
And I certainly wouldn't put it past Red Bull to throw a result away. They are not having the best time lately. As an ensemble team, they've had the win with Verstappen, they had the win with Ricciardo, but getting both cars home in solid positions has not been happening so much lately.
That's a very good point, actually. I mean, we'll talk about Red Bull in a little while, because Daniel Ricciardo having a thoroughly miserable weekend today. Like I said, I'm not going to talk too much about it now because we'll cover it in a little bit as well. But we'll talk about the controversy, because there is a little bit sort of going around. I don't know how much to make of it personally, but we'll talk about that in a second. But I think Lewis Hamilton, he was very lucky. There's no doubt about that with the way things fell for him today. But still, Jonty, 14th on the grid to a win. As I've said about so many drivers this season, whether you get lucky or not, you've got to put yourself in that position to take advantage of that, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you've always got to be available to take the benefit from any kind of drama on track. And he certainly put himself into that position by coming through the field so quickly. I mean, he really, really was flying so early on. I mean, he was up to, was he 8th or 9th by about lap 7, lap 8. I mean, it was crazy pace. So he put himself in contention to be able to get the most out of any instance, but he just could not have hoped for anything better.
Absolutely. And I think as well, to be honest, Stuart, this kind of does highlight that huge gap between the front three and the rest of the field, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's something that's becoming clearer and clearer with each race. As we were watching Hamilton come through the field, it became clear he was going to make mincemeat of absolutely everyone until he got to Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes at the front, of which there are only 4 of them in this race. And only then would we see what his pace was to see if he could close that gap up.
Kind of shows how much we need 2021 to close things up, because there were drivers, quite frankly, and I got quite annoyed about it, as you'll remember, Jonty, from the watch along, drivers like Alonso just hopping out Hamilton's way. And I understand it's not their race, but they are there to race. So at least, even if you want to make it easy for him, at least still make these drivers, these Ferraris, Mercedes coming through the field, still make them work for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've seen a lot of people saying, oh, get rid of blue flags. Well, on the performances we've seen, certainly in the last 2 races, do we even need the blue flags? Because it's certainly not been very difficult for the faster cars to get through. So there is a gaping chasm between the top 3 and the rest. I mean, it really is huge. There was 12 seconds back to Magnussen by lap 9. So well over a second every single lap. That's just too much.
I was just thinking, actually, back to the watch along. I can't remember. I'm just trying to think what the gap was, but I seem to think right after the safety car, we'd only had 4 or 5 laps, and Hülkenberg was about 12 seconds, maybe 16 seconds off Verstappen. It was something like that. It was a big gap. We were quite surprised, weren't we, Jonty?
Yeah, very much so. I was expecting them to be a little bit closer than that.
It needs to be sorted for 2021, but that's probably a conversation for another. Well, it is a conversation for another stream. I've just been sent by ST actually some reaction from Sebastian Vettel. His quote on what happened said, "Mine was a small mistake with a big impact on the race. I braked a bit too late and I locked the rears. I'm very disappointed." So that kind of, that kind of highlights, like you say, Stuart, a little bit of it looked like a bit of a funny incident or a silly incident, but obviously lock up the rears in the wet, you're only going one way really, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think there's an ongoing argument here, which maybe now's not the time to get into, about how harsh a punishment gravel can be for a small mistake. And again, I don't know how wet it was there, but if it had been tarmac, maybe he'd been able to get out of it, maybe lost 1 position to Raikkonen and be able to keep racing.
Somebody in chat, I don't know, mods, let me know if we're being wound up here a little bit. Apparently Hamilton has been summoned to the stewards.
Yeah,
yes, that's right.
Yeah, I was waiting for this subject to come up. It's official. I'll see the documents from the FIA.
Okay, so I think that kind of fits quite nicely now that we could cover this one. This is the controversy that a lot of people are not happy about on social media. Under the safety car, Lewis Hamilton went to come into the pit lane not following Valtteri Bottas, but just after Valtteri Bottas, and changed his mind. There was no lock-up. It was not sliding out the pit lane. He changed his mind. He'd already crossed the white line and gone past the bollard on pit entry and then cut back across the grass to rejoin the track. That, under the regulations, is actually not allowed. The official rule is when entering the pits, drivers must keep to the left of the white line on the track before the start of the pit entry. Furthermore, any car with 4 wheels to the left of the white line must enter the pit lane. So, based on the rules, he is in breach of that. But what I can't understand is, why has this taken an hour and 20 minutes or so for it to be summoned to the stewards? And that's a bit of it. I'm putting you on the spot there, Jonty and Stuart, but I'm just wondering, this seems to have taken a long time. And what's your take on this incident? Do you think it should be a penalty, starting with you, Jonty? I'll be nice to Stuart, it's his debut.
Yeah, see, the thing is, these are from the sporting regs, which are very much track specific. And everything I've seen so far, what people have been sharing are the pre-race notes from Baku, where it makes perfect sense. If someone's bailing a pit entry there, the cars behind them are doing 320 kilometers an hour plus, whereas at Hockenheim they're doing about 120 going round a corner. It's a much lesser danger. So it isn't specifically stated in the Hockenheim ones. It says they have to stay to the right when going in, but it doesn't say they can't come out over the left. It's really awkward one. And at the moment, it's an alleged breach.
Yeah, and I've got the stewarding note in front of me here, and yeah, he's being so the alleged breach is of Chapter 4 of the Sporting Code, which is I've just completely broken the PDF. Clever me, but yeah. So it's 4D, Chapter 4, 4D of the Sporting Code, which is except in case of force majeure, the crossing in any direction of the line separating the pit entry and the track by a car entering the pit lane is prohibited, which I think we can agree he did, but there have been lots of cases at many tracks where drivers sort of weave in and out of the pit entry line because it's sort of in the racing line, so it doesn't tend to be picked up very often. So I'm unclear as to this particular example. Sorry, I was speaking without microphone. I'm unclear whether this particular example is a breach of the Sporting Code, but I do kind of think there should be a firmer rule around this so that it's very clear that for all races, crossing the line does or does not give you a penalty.
I think what I see, this is obviously just my personal opinion, I think this is the other thing, and I completely agree with what you're saying now. There needs to be a clear rule, because I'm about to give a different interpretation to maybe 50 people in the chat, and it might be different to you guys, and it shouldn't be open to interpretation. It should be that is a penalty or that is not a penalty. But when you look at, I know you said there about weaving in and out, and I understand that, and that's a very good point to make, because some tracks, and newer tracks in particular, it is just a white line, but he's gone past that bollard and then cut right across the grass. And that's kind of how I look at it and say it would be a harsh penalty in some respects, because it didn't really... Was it really that dangerous under the safety car? But as the rules are written, it really ought to be some sort of penalty.
Yeah, I mean, if he does get penalised, I wouldn't be fighting against that. I think there's definitely an unclarity in the wider rules there. Some might argue that it wasn't picked up because it was in the most chaotic period of the race when there was sort of half rain and everyone was pitting and there were incidents going off around. However, it was on the main feed, and I think most of Twitter was arguing about it for the rest of the race. So you'd think the stewards would have picked it up quicker.
Are we expecting, Jonty, probably a bit more likely a reprimand or a fine rather than a time penalty?
It's very, very difficult because, like Stuart said, it was picked up on the main footage. The commentators themselves were talking about it. We were talking about it in our watch-along. Twitter was exploding about it. Surely the stewards must know what's going on there and know that even if they make a calling which is right, it's going to cause massive drama all down the pit lane. So they should have been addressing it immediately, because now there's, after the race, we're well over an hour after the race is finished. The trouble this will cause, if they do go ahead and give them a time penalty, it will be enormous.
This is the thing. It also, they're at this point, again, we've seen this already this season a lot. They're about to set a precedent, aren't they?
Yes, quite. I think it's slightly different from the Kimi example in Baku that people are bringing up, because there was a very definitive rule about the Baku entrance in the race briefing. But hopefully once they sort this out, we won't have to argue about it again. What's interesting is that Bottas is just inside the 5-second penalty bracket.
Yeah, I've just popped that result back up on screen for everybody. Obviously, 5-second penalty drops him to second. A 10-second would drop him to fourth. I think 10 would be very harsh, if I'm being completely honest. It doesn't affect Mercedes. They still get their 1-2, so it's going to be interesting to see. But if obviously we get any update on that, we will bring it to you during the stream. Or I'm sure if we miss it, somebody in chat will let us know. They're pretty good about that. But one other thing that's got people talking, once again, and not for the first time in F1, is it? Team orders. Me and Jonty have had our say quite a lot on team orders, Stuart. How do you stand on them? Do you think they're a part of the sport that are good? Do you think it's bad, or do you think it's something we just have to get over because it is a team sport as well?
Well, I think the first thing that's important to note is there are different situations for different team orders, and I think two very different situations came forth in this race. The Ferrari situation was a case where they were both actually on different strategies, so it's arguable whether or not they were in the same race or not. I don't know if Kimi could have taken his set competitively as far as Vettel could, and he was probably on a 2-stop strategy if it didn't rain, so it was better to get him out of the way and put Vettel in the best position. Later on, with the two Mercedes, they were fighting for position, and whether or not you allow them to fight is a different story. So I think there are examples where team orders make sense. You move people out of the way to put them so your strategies don't effectively damage each other. I think there are examples where one person is more clearly in the championship, so you just move people out of the way even if they have a chance to get a good result. And that's where I think it comes down to how far through the championship you are and how much of an advantage does one of your drivers have. I would prefer to have allowed Bottas to keep fighting for it. I understand why they didn't, because it was a slippery track and there was a chance they could have thrown the 1-2 away. But that's the line I set. And I think Ferrari's one was okay because they were on different strategies, and the Mercedes situation, I would have preferred to let them fight.
I love Kimi's reaction to all of that, by the way. I was talking to Jonty about it in the watch long. I love how it's just like, just tell me what you want me to do. I don't want all these codes and all these clever things. Just tell me to get out of the way if you want me out of the way, basically. I love that. But I tend to agree on the Ferrari thing. I think that was a right call, but I would have preferred, again, like you, Stuart, to see the Mercedes fighting. Do you think that's where team orders are an issue, Jonty, where you've got... it stops us having a fight for the win? Obviously the Ferraris could have fought, but it's compromising their races, so you get that. But do you understand where Mercedes are coming from a little bit?
I do, yeah. I mean, I think, did I say to you in the watch along, it might have been on Twitter, that Bottas knows he's pretty much out of the title fight now. Purely due to luck, I'll be the first to admit that. And we saw that again today, because Hamilton would have been nowhere near Bottas to challenge for that in reality if he hadn't lost, 15, 20 seconds in that pit stop. That was a hell of a lot of time. Yes, they were behind the safety car, but it just put everyone on the back foot. So it's probably right from the team's perspective, but not from the fans' perspective. It would have been much better to let them fight fair and square.
We did kind of lose that fight for the win, didn't we? Like Stuart was saying, I think that's where my frustration comes in. But at the same time, as is said so often, and as I've already said in this stream, it's a team sport as well at the end of the day. And when it comes down to it, the money's handed out in the Constructors' Championship, not the drivers. So they've got to think about it. And the last thing they want at their home Grand Prix is two Mercedes in the gravel trapping bits, because then they'd be more heavily criticised for allowing them to race a bit like the Red Bulls in Baku and that happening than actually calling team orders. That's just my view.
I think what's interesting from Toto Wolff's reaction when they spoke to him afterwards was that Bottas surprised them by leaping all over Hamilton straight away. And I would have been interested to see what Mercedes would have done had Bottas pulled it off and got into the lead. Because again, there's a difference between holding station and letting someone through. And I'm sure a lot of people would have said, of course, they would have asked Bottas to let Hamilton through. But again, that is a very different situation.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? You have to look at it from a team perspective, and it makes sense for Mercedes. It just would have been nice to see a proper fight for the lead, but that is Formula One. We've got to talk a little bit, or not got to talk, I want to talk a little bit about Max Verstappen. He started fourth, finished fourth, so on the face of it, a bit boring in that respect, but it wasn't. He drove very, very well today. Once again, it's another race he's managed to keep it clean. And versus his teammate, I think it's fair to say, Jonty, the tables have turned massively. He's definitely got control of his season now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. As I said to you, it's like he's having the season Ricciardo had last year. The tables are completely reversed. The bad luck that Ricciardo's getting with mechanical failures now is just crazy. So he's really turned it around and has been completely incident-free for how many races now?
It's his last. I think his last one was Monaco, wasn't it? In FP3. I think that was his last incident because there was nothing in Canada, nothing in. He did have the spin at Silverstone, but I think that was a mechanical issue, so I can't think we can really blame him on that one. So he's looking good, and I think he's come under a lot of criticism, hasn't he, this season? Criticism this season, hasn't he, Stuart? But he's kind of taken that on board and matured quite nice, and he's just getting on with it now, and he's getting to the point, which is not a bad thing for him at the moment, where he's kind of slipping under the radar a little bit, and then you look at the result and go, oh, Verstappen did well today.
Yeah, he's really upped his game in the, I guess, what you call the second quarter of the season. I think a lot of people forget is just how young he is, and yes, he was promoted early and he's clearly got the talent, but I think he's got the anger and the frustration that like a young Alonso and a young Vettel had when they first came into it, and they rifled a lot of feathers when they came in. But I'm really interested to see how he keeps it all together and doesn't leap at every potential overtake like an animal, like he used to do, which used to get him into trouble. And we've heard less of him angrily sniping on the radio. So yeah, I mean, I think he's got the potential to dominate Ricciardo for the rest of the year, which as a bit of a Ricciardo fan is a shame to see. But, you know, I think his time to step towards the championship is coming.
He's come of age even. He's just improved so much. I'm very surprised at him. I believe it or not, people say that I am a Verstappen hater, even though all I ever seem to do is praise him. So I expected it to go the other way and everyone calling me a fanboy. But I think when you compare him to the first 6 races of the year, he's not a completely different driver, but he seems to have a totally different head on him, Jonty. But at the same time, he's not changed his driving style. Is it just a case of he's been out of trouble because he's not been putting himself in that position? If that makes sense, he's been getting it right on a Saturday, and so he's not in the position to have a collision with a Hülkenberg or a Stroll, for example.
Yeah, that is an element to it. His qualifying performances have come up quite a bit. But I think it's just a case of just picking his battles more wisely. You know, going for something that is a clear chance as opposed to something that is enough of a gap to fit a car. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's great. But that's what we said, though, didn't we? When I think it was after China, we kind of both agreed at the time that he doesn't need to change his driving style. He just needs to think and just be a bit more calculated in the moves that he makes. And okay, he's not really had many around him today, but then when he has, he's got on with it. And I thought that battle with Kimi was brilliant. And I thought he was just going to get him, but I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I did as well. It was really, really good close racing. And that's what we want to see, but it was respectful. That's the big difference.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing more of those kind of thoughtful attacks from Verstappen. He's moving in that direction where he doesn't sort of he doesn't see the next position ahead and just sort of feel entitled to it. He's thinking about how to approach it. And you're right, he hasn't changed his style dramatically. There's just a slightly more thoughtful approach.
That's big. I mean, I hope he does well for the rest of the season and can really go for a title, especially with Honda coming on board next year. Might set them up nicely for 2021 if that works out. But one man who probably can't wait to get to 2019, whatever team he's going to be with, is Daniel Ricciardo. Jonty, just all I could do is sigh, because that's all I could do in the watch along. I just don't know what to say, because he's got no luck. The start of the season looked so promising. We were talking about him as a potential championship contender, and it's just all gone wrong. And let's not forget, this is a power unit that was changed this weekend.
Yeah, I'm sure I remember from during the race someone in the team saying it, or Ted maybe saying it was MGU-K that had gone. which I'm sure he had I'm pretty sure he had every component changed, or at least most of them. So it's very, very bad to see this happening. And why him? Why aren't any of the other Renault guys suffering in this way?
So I know he had the MGU-K, the control electronics, and the energy store, I think, were changed this weekend, which is a lot of parts change, which obviously put into the back of the grid. But perhaps, I know you've just said you're a bit of a Ricciardo fan, Stuart, so it's probably quite painful to see him going through this. But do you think maybe all these penalties having to take means that he's in traffic longer, which is more heat going through the engine? He's having to push harder to recover. Could that be part of the problem?
I mean, that certainly is a possibility. It's definitely easier to control both the race and your car from the front. We weren't really looking at most of the race. He was on a very strange strategy from the off. I think it became clear a few laps in that the medium tyre was not great to be on. And while there is a discrepancy between the Mercedes car and the Red Bull car, by the time Hamilton was up to 6th, Ricciardo was still floating around in 12th, I think. So yeah, I think you see often in Formula One, when someone is on the back foot, things just start to snowball because you're a bit more desperate, you're in more traffic, you're having to push the car in a different way, you're in hot air a lot. That is a possibility. Again, I wasn't sure what broke on his car this time. Was it the MGU-K? Is that what they said?
It sounds like it, yeah.
Okay, well that, again, seems to be a recurring problem with that particular car.
It's frustrating. He's such a nice guy as well, isn't he? And I don't think of ever met anybody who dislikes Ricciardo. So it's difficult to watch him go through this. But he was on a weird strategy, but we kind of said before the race, didn't we, Jonty, that why not stick the mediums on some cars out of position and just run till the rain? And it could have worked out for him quite nicely. But his start, whether it comes down to tyres or not, was very poor.
I'm starting to think that was probably on purpose. Danny Rick's not stupid. There's always the chance of the midfield or those towards the back coming together at the start of the race. So I do get the feeling that he was just making a point of staying neutral because it's not really going to cost him any time. You know, any time he loses on a poor start like that, he's going to make up in the first lap. So I'd probably be careful in that situation as well, if I'm honest.
It's a fair point, actually, because the speed they carry through turn one, it could have been chaos, couldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Him coming through behind everyone when they get together. That's a recipe for disaster.
Do we think perhaps now Red Bull... We were talking a few races ago, Jonty, about possibly being a title contender. I don't know what you think, Stuart, as well, but is it third now for them in the Constructors, the main focus, and just getting to next year now?
Yeah, there really was that. There was that time, I think, 6 races in when they had two wins apiece, and there was the possibility that if Red Bull got all their ducks in a line, they could really mount a challenge. But that hasn't materialized, and the gap between them and the top 2 has grown. The question now is, what do they do with that? Do they settle for third and just try and pick up race wins where possible? They can only build up towards next year so much because they're changing engine suppliers. So they're kind of in a weird no man's land at the moment.
That's a great point, really. Starting development on next year, they can't until they know exactly what's going to happen from Honda's side, can they? So that's a really good point. But I mean, then I don't see them getting caught for third. So I mean, they could do. But one thing I always feel with Red Bull is not that Ferrari and Mercedes aren't and that every other team aren't, but they are racing first and foremost. We saw in Baku, they'll let their guys race if they have to, and they'll go right to Abu Dhabi trying to get as far up that championship as they can. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, I just feel for the guy, but I'm also very happy for Verstappen being able to turn his season around. So it's difficult. It just seems to have flipped again, doesn't it, Jonty? You've just said that, but it just feels like it's flipped the other way again, as we saw last season, actually, didn't we? Was it Verstappen who had the bad start and then Ricciardo who had the bad second end to the second half of the season?
Yeah, Verstappen's season last year didn't really get going until after the summer break. I think he had 7 DNFs before the summer break last year. 6 or 7, something like that.
I think that's right.
I just hope they can at least, as they've said, Singapore, Hungary, Mexico possibly as well. I just hope they can take the fight to those top top two teams in some of these Grand Prix to keep it interesting for us. And of course, perhaps, correct me maybe if I'm being a little bit reading too much into it maybe, or being a bit hopeful, they could actually have quite a decisive say in the World Championship this year if they start taking points away from title contenders.
Sorry, who are you asking?
Either. I'm just, I'm like Jonty. I just like to ponder things every now and again and throw things out there. But I can go to Stuart first.
I mean, they very much could. I think either of the Red Bull drivers could pick off the secondary Mercedes or Ferrari drivers for sure. And I think they're gunning for wins wherever possible. They're not going to be worried like some of what we're calling the midfield, even though it's like everybody from Renault down, or whoever is in fourth now. Unlike the midfield, Red Bull are not going to leap out of the way of anybody, and they're going to defend every position they can get. So I still think they've got a few wins left in them. They're going to start taking points away from Hamilton, Vettel, and whoever is still gunning for the championship by the end.
I'm just very much looking forward to the fight. Get thinking, Stuart. Get thinking, Jonty. Because on Twitter earlier, I posted the usual 3-word race report tweets, and you've responded in a huge number. This gets harder every week. It really does to go through these, but I'll read a few. I can't read them all, unfortunately. ARD says, Valtteri, it's James. That's a good one, actually. Green Man, team orders suck. Scott says, screw this sport. Somebody not very happy with today. I have a feeling Scott's a Ferrari fan, so can understand that. FIA Ayusa says, Alex, Andy Fraser, Gasly on wets. What was that about, Stuart? We couldn't believe that in the race watch long. Gasly went straight to wets.
I don't know. I don't think anyone had a good answer for it other than let's put all our money on red. And if there's a chance that, although even if it had suddenly started completely pouring it down, how many positions would they possibly have gained that the cars ahead of them wouldn't have been able to gain by pitting? Because most of the cars were still on dries by that point. So very, very strange move, unless they forgot what colours the intermediates were.
Maybe. It's been a while since we've seen them, really, isn't it, in a race? So maybe under the safety car that would have made sense, but it just made no sense to me whatsoever. Dequiet One, great name, says Vettel binned it. Fraser says championship shake-up. Amir sprinkles every race. Richard Hartley got points. Absolutely. Great day for Hartley. Was so happy to see him get that. Victor, rain too late. Massively. Kelly says expect the unexpected. English, Sean, it is first language. Victor, still I rise. William Howard, need more rain. Bill Starr, one to remember. Liam, Ricciardo deserves better. We were just saying that, weren't we? Completely agree with that one. Cole, I'm so done. Decisive team order, says Raul. Yes, I'm picking names I can say, by the way. James, Vettel, the flip. Downshift, Ericsson got points. Noel Marcus got points. Absolutely big up the Discord posse. Yes, I said that again at 32 years old. W, full wet Gasly. A few of you quite surprised by that one as well. Take a couple more from here. Bottas should have won, said Connor. And I think we'll go with... Brenda says no more team orders. And Unknown Iffy says, well done, Lewis. So, yeah, thank you very much, by the way, for the super chat contribution. Racer094, really do appreciate that, mate. It says, Kvyat to replace Kimi for his home race in Russia at the request of Ferrari's Russian sponsors. Would you guys like to see Kvyat versus Vettel and Kvyat win in Russia? What do you reckon to that one, Jonty?
It would be interesting, and knowing how various sponsors from all over the world work, not completely impossible, 1% chance of happening, but it'd be very interesting, wouldn't it?
It would. If nothing else, it would be a laugh, definitely. I don't know how Vettel would feel about that after what happened a few years ago in Russia, but you're not getting off the hook with this one. Your 3-word race report, Jonty.
Weather teases again.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a very good one. What about you, Stuart?
I'm going to go with wait for it.
Wait for it. I thought you were asking me to wait for it then. I was like, really? Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that could cover quite a few races. There's been quite a few races where the pattern of the race has been, we've spent the first half sort of it goes into a bit of a lull, and everyone sort of separates out, but we're waiting for the first set of pit stops, or we're waiting for something to happen, or we're waiting for an accident to throw everything to disarray. And I think this time we spent an awful long time waiting for the rain, which we've done quite a few races this year, and it never actually came, but this time it did.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to the Gasly thing where they threw everything on red, hoping for a downpour. It could have worked. You saw how much rain there was during the podium even. Only a few minutes after the race. If that had come 15 minutes earlier, it's highly possible Gasly could have won that race. Because the amount of water that came down, all the guys on slicks would have been hard-pressed just to get back to the pits.
That's a good point.
It's a very good point.
That'd be a laugh, wouldn't it? It'd be great to see Gasly take the win.
I mean, have you seen the little clip of the underpass coming up into the paddock at the back?
Yeah.
Going down the stairs, and it's a waterfall. It's full-on monsoon over there right now.
That would have probably as well, wouldn't it? That would have been the first time we'd see the proper race standing restart, because that would have brought out the red flag if that had come down like that.
Yeah, definitely. They're very sensitive about heavy rain these days.
Just got another super chat coming through. Thank you very much to I'm Very Imperfect. Oh, thank you very much for your contribution. It says rain, rain, rain. Kind of was the topic of the day, wasn't it, really? We were watching it and kind of... Did we say in the race? It might have been in my head, but I think we said in the race watch song, Jonty, that we got to the point of the Grand Prix where everybody was just looking at the sky, waiting for something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we could all see the crowds all the way around the track. You think, come on. And then it came in at turn 6. Possibly one of the slowest corner on the track, which meant that they kind of could get around it without too much of an issue. If just that little bit of rain had been over turn 1, it could have been a very, very different situation.
Definitely. It's gutted we didn't get a proper downpour like we got at the end. Thank you very much as well to Yokoyama for your contribution. Really appreciate that. Says never rains, but yeah, that absolutely. By the way, if anybody wants to send any rain my way, that'd be absolutely great because it's still boiling here. It's ridiculous. But Lewis Hamilton got the official driver of the day today, which means you know what's coming. I'm about to really, really upset a lot of mods because there's quite a few people watching today. We always get a lot, but I think we're double the usual audience for this. So in one word, everybody in chat, your driver of the day. And I'll come to you first, Stuart. Who was your driver of the day?
God, it's a really tough one because of the way the race changed shape halfway through. I was impressed with Hamilton. I have to say, he put himself where he needed to be. I think that's what everyone was doing. Everyone was sort of getting themselves into position for if it did rain, and Hamilton happened to, but he got lucky as well. But this time I'm going to give it to Hamilton for what was actually quite a solid, strong, uncomplicated drive for the win.
What about you, Jonty? Your driver of the day as chat explodes.
I'm going to go with Romain Grosjean. This guy, under serious amounts of pressure, has recovered in the pre-race. He's got to perform because he keeps making mistakes. He did so in, was it Austria? Where he had a great race. Bit of an issue in Britain, but he's pulled it back again. Solid P6 in difficult conditions. So, yeah, that's my choice.
I'm going to go with a guy. I know I obviously Lewis Hamilton deserves a big shout out for his drive today, but everyone knows I like to try and go a little bit further down the field and find somebody that maybe isn't getting quite so much mention. But I'm going to go with Esteban Ocon. He seems to be getting forgotten quite a bit. Started well down the grid in 15th and drove very well to come back to P8, was it, in the end, just behind his teammate. So obviously safety cars and things helped out, but I think Esteban Ocon for me is going to get driver of the day. That could change tomorrow after I watch the race back without me talking over it. But at the minute, I'd say Esteban Ocon.
Yeah, both Force Indias pulled off a one-stop strategy. They managed to, as far as from my notes, they managed to take their first set of tyres right through to the chaos of the safety car and then took that to the end, which was really interesting.
I spoke a lot about Perez in the race. I was really impressed with him, apart from his spin, obviously, throughout the Grand Prix. Definitely, they're looking good for us. They're definitely turning things around this season. But I'll take a few of your driver of the day is from chat. I'm going to scroll to the top, but this could take me a while. Bear with me. We've got Hülkenberg, Grosjean, Hamilton, Ericsson, Hülkenberg, Bottas, Grosjean, Raikkonen. I can't give it to Raikkonen, unfortunately. I think he could have really taken that fight to Bottas a bit better at the end. What it isn't raining in Britain? It doesn't seem to be, mate. It seems to have been forever since we last got rain. Ericsson, a lot for Ericsson. This is all going to be from Discord, I'd imagine. Bottas, Hamilton, Trulli. It's always a Trulli. There's always a Trulli in this chat when I'm going through it. Magnussen gets one. I was quite disappointed with Magnussen in the end today. Race of two halves for him, definitely. Grosjean, Gasly, Hülkenberg, King Marcus of Ericsson. I'm never going to live that down, am I? King Marcus of Ericsson. A lot of love for Hülkenberg. Ocon's got a few shouts as well. Vettel, he would have got that because he drove very, very well up to that point. So I can kind of see that one. But other than that, it all seems to be a lot of Hülkenberg, a lot of Lewis, and a lot of Ocon, which is good to see. So some good split in there, which means, as we said before, Jonty, that tends to show we've had a pretty decent race.
Yeah, if no one can call out any one person as a standout drive, then clearly everyone's been doing equally well to some degree, or equally badly. That can happen as well.
I got a couple more. Oh, sorry, Stuart, you can go, mate, while I just try and find these.
I was just going to say, I should give a shout out to Hartley, who I made fun of several times throughout the race, because on the grid he'd said, yeah, I'm looking to get points today from 18th, where he was for most of the race. But come the end of the race, he's in 10th. So good for him.
Absolutely. I was genuinely so pleased that he got that, because he's another one, isn't he? Such a nice guy and deserves a lot better, but he's been a bit scruffy this year and deserves that point. But I've got a couple more contributions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much once again to Racer094. Says Sainz or Kvyat, as Danny beat him in GP3 by 100 points. Sainz. I'd still go with Sainz on that one. Tainedge, I've butchered that name. I'm so sorry. Thank you very much for your super chat. Says, could Hamilton get a penalty for the cutting? We're still waiting to hear on that one. If we get any news while we're live, we will, of course, bring that to you. And Gina says, is it over for Vettel? Will he win again this season, or is it over? They've got the fastest car, Ferrari, definitely, so I fully expect him to turn that around. I still think I'm still going to call him for the title. I've been saying that all season. I can't backtrack because you guys won't ever let me forget that if I do. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Vettel for the title. So plenty of time to turn this around, Jonty.
Oh, yeah, very much so. I mean, it would be crazy to say that Vettel might not win again. He certainly is going to win. I'd say they're probably looking strongest for the next, not Hungary, but when we come back after summer break, very high speed, high power tracks at Monza and Spa. It could well be Ferrari's races to take now. And quick update on the penalty thing. Charlie Whiting has said anything's possible. They might tell him off. They might give him a reprimand. They might give him a 5 or 10 second penalty, but the likely one would be on the lower end of the scale. So even Charlie Whiting himself can't call what the stewards are going to do.
Just on that as well, Keith Collandine has reviewed quite a lot of the stewards' inquiries into cutting the pit lane entry and found they were only ever penalised when it was explicitly stated in the pre-race notes.
So it looks like we might be getting no penalty then, or just a reprimand, do we think?
I think it seems likely. It'll definitely be at the very low end, if anything.
Yeah, just to watch what you're doing, lad. Nothing else.
Kind of a bit like one of those, if you do it again, we will give you a bigger penalty, but this is first offence, not really a big deal to them, maybe. I don't know. It's weird. I kind of want to just say rules are rules, so I think there should be something, but at the end of the day, is it that big a deal? Dare I say that and ask that question, Jonty?
Ooh. It's likely to have come from an appeal. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, maybe they do take notice of what people say on social media, but people weren't happy at all with what happened there. But no news really at the moment, just waiting for that confirmation. Hopefully it'll come through while we're live. If not, of course, I'll cover it in the race review. There we go. I have no idea what's going on with the race review tomorrow, so I'll make sure it's covered in that one for you. But We're going to move on to Q&A. I've just realised, by the way, I forgot Sean versus Jonty, but don't worry, it was dire. I think we're still about 5-5, to be honest, Jonty. I don't think anything's changed. It wasn't our finest hour, was it?
Nah. Is that because I did better than you again?
Oh, shut up. Shut up with your I did better than you. Oh, I'll rig this. I will rig this. I will win this one way or another. But it's not going to happen. Take some questions from chat then for the next 15 minutes. Oh, guess what? I overran by 5 minutes. Surprise. Let's have a look through here. A lot of people asking about the penalty. Some people saying they think a grid drop would be fair. I think that would be incredibly harsh. Anything to say about Williams? What can we say about Williams that hasn't already been said? Disappointing for Sirotkin. Expected a little bit more from him, if I'm being totally honest. But yeah, both of them retired, didn't they, with mechanical issues? It's not... What can I say, Jonty? I mean, they're struggling. End of.
Yeah, but they were significantly quicker than we're expecting them to be. So there's definitely some improvement there. Hopefully they can keep it going.
Yeah. What's your take on Williams this season, Stuart, and in this race in particular as well?
I have to be honest, I didn't notice them so much in this race until they were sort of gone.
Yeah.
Which has kind of been a theme for this year. Williams are a really interesting case. And I think a pattern that we've seen from them, like over a long period of time, like longer than a decade, is their unwillingness to invest. So they find themselves in situations where they, not purely by luck, but for example, in 2014, when they had the Mercedes engine, which was way better than everyone else, and they were suddenly third in the championship for a couple of seasons running, but they didn't do anything with that. They didn't progress forward. We rarely see them actually pushing forward the way Force India have tended to do, or Renault are doing now. We've tended to see a rules change, put them into a fortuitous position, and then them slowly drop down because they're a poorer team and a team that's not willing particularly to spend much money.
That's a great point on, yeah. I mean, I think it's sad. A lot of people think it's hilarious. I think it's very sad to see them in their current plight, but like you say, they're not really willing to spend the cash in the same way other teams are. I know they haven't really got the cash like some of the other teams, but they should survive. I think they just about do enough, don't they, to survive financially and get through, but they could lose Stroll at the end of this season, which surprises me, Jonty, because I thought he was going to be there forever, basically. But talk, he's going to end up at Force India, and that is a big hit in the pocket, potentially, for Williams, especially as well, losing Martini at the end of the year.
Yeah, that was a point I'd actually forgotten about until you mentioned it just then. You know, it's a big sponsorship deal with Martini, worth quite a bit of money. So the chance of losing both them and the income from Lance Stroll is massive. And could really spell disaster for them if they don't get things turned around pretty quick.
I hope they can. I really do, because it is sad to see them down there. So, a lot, as often in chat, a lot of people kind of criticising Claire Williams for it. So, Chamber is wise. I like, says Flying Tiger. There you go. You got a compliment, Stuart. I never get compliments anymore.
Oh, thank you, whoever that was.
I had a contribution as well. Thank you very much again from Racer094. Says Alonso from 2012 or Hamilton from 2014. I'm dodging that question. What's your take on that one, Stuart? Which one would you take? 2012 Alonso or 2014 Hamilton?
Oh God. I think I would take 2012 Alonso. I think I've never seen him hungrier than then. I think it was his. I think he saw it as his first chance in a long time and his last chance in a while, and he was absolutely on it. And I mean, you could see from his face how devastated he was at the end. I'm a big fan of Alonso generally, and I'm kind of sad to see the position he's in right now. It's kind of like Williams. He's kind of like Williams in driver form. He's like, he shouldn't be where he is. We should be seeing him getting to scraps at the top.
Yeah, I mean, that was a terrible Ferrari as well. Same with 2010, really poor Ferrari that he drove to nearly a championship, Jonty.
Yeah, I was gutted when he didn't take that championship. In my opinion, that would have been one of the greatest driver titles ever taken because of how bad that car was. He drove out of his skin dragging that thing to victories. So, yeah, that would be my pick. 2012 Alonso. It's one of the best performances I've seen personally during my time watching.
I'm going to dodge it because I have to read the comments afterwards and I'm wrong either way. So I'm not going to call that one. A few people asking for Chain Bear F1 bingo. I'm sure you'll update that on your Twitter, won't you, Stuart?
Oh, yeah, that's definitely coming. I was hanging on to wait to see what the engine rules of 2021 are, but that seems to have hit a stall. So, yeah, I might do that in the summer break.
There you go. That's answered that one for you. A few more questions before we go. I did spot one, but they scroll so quickly. But if Williams were winning this year instead, would Martini still be leaving? That's a good point, says from Hamilton Fan 89. Probably not. Probably not. If Williams were winning, they'd probably keep that sponsorship. But to be honest, even if they were winning, if Martini then decided to go, they'd soon find somebody else, wouldn't they, Jonty? If you're a winning car, you can soon load that car with sponsors.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, every team will want as many sponsors as they can get. You want bigger name sponsors. You know, I'm very surprised we haven't seen some of the biggest companies in the world sort of being approached by the teams. But again, it's another tricky one. Stop coming to me with the hard ones.
I'm making you work. I'll get slapped for that. Astro, really good question, this one, actually. Has Hartley saved his career? One swallow doesn't make a summer. Yes, I've gone with a cliche line. And it is only 1 point. It is only one race. He's had a lot of scruffy races this season, Stuart. But this will help. If nothing else with Toro Rosso, it's going to help build his confidence. And he can hopefully start to build on this as the season goes on.
Yeah, Hartley's a bit of a mystery to me. He came in partway through last season with a lot of expectation on his shoulders. He'd been successful in other series, particularly WEC, and he seemed like a Ricciardo type, a very likable and a very thoughtful guy. And he just hasn't seemed to found out how to get the most out of his car. So, but to the question, has he saved his career? I think we'll have to see the rest of the season. I don't think he's contracted for next year yet. Can't remember, but he's definitely sort of stuck in the seat for the rest of the season, and I really like to see him do well. But again, Toro Rosso are a bit. You never know what you're going to get from race to race with them, so it's really hard for him to show himself. I'm
gonna put you on a spot now, Stuart, and then give Jonty a break for a second. I did ask him this actually in the watch along under the safety car. Do we think Red Bull have kind of come out and denied it this week? They're going to sacrifice Toro Rosso's season to develop that Honda engine. Do you fully expect that as the season progresses now and we're getting to the business end of it, Toro Rosso not really improving, do you fully expect they will become a test team to Honda and Red Bull for the rest of this season?
I think, well, it's a tricky position for Red Bull. I think if there's anything they're unsure about, they'll probably offload it to Toro Rosso first. But Toro Rosso are also a useful team to have. They're a useful team to bring their drivers through. They seem very committed to their young driver program. And if you keep putting these young drivers in a team you're just throwing rubbish engines at and not giving any support to, then you're not developing your drivers. So I don't think they're going to go all in and just like completely waste the team to build themselves up. But no, I wouldn't be surprised if they played things strategically across all four cars, I guess I'll say.
Still no word, by the way, on any penalty for Lewis Hamilton. I tend to agree. I think we're heading towards a reprimand or similar here. Will Van Dorn keep his drive for 2019, or will Lando Norris replace him next year, asks Uncle Brendy. The talk is at the moment, Jonty, as we covered again a little bit earlier, that Sainz is tipped for that seat alongside Alonso, which still surprises me.
Yeah, because you have to think from Alonso's point of view, that would work better as a swap. It has been reported that Renault want him back, but the money isn't right. And Sainz is insistent that he wants a 2-year deal wherever he goes, which is making things very, very awkward for all the teams looking to fill up their seats for next year. I can't see Van Dorn staying, I must be honest. I know the struggle hasn't been all down to him. Alonso has admitted as much publicly this weekend, saying he hasn't got all of the upgrades that Alonso gets. So it's difficult, but I don't see him being there.
I'd be disappointed. Everyone knows I do rate Van Dorn very highly, and I think he's been quite unlucky this year. But even when the car has been underneath him, Stuart, he hasn't been anywhere near his teammate, has he? Really? I mean, they're saying he's within a couple of tenths, but the timesheets at times have shown it, but not enough.
No, but it's a very tricky benchmark when you're a relatively new driver and you're up against Fernando Alonso, who, despite being somewhat distracted, being not in the top team of the grid, is pulling a lot of weight in that team, and I'm amazed he's still there. He clearly cares about something. So yeah, I think Van Dorn's a really tricky one to rate, and I wonder what Sainz would look like next to Alonso. At least if the pair of them win there, they could attract a Spanish sponsor like Santander or Telefonica.
Yeah, good point. I mean, I suppose I'm going to put you on the spot again. Would you put Norris in that car alongside Alonso next year, or do you think that's a bit of a gamble with Norris being still so young?
I mean, part of me thinks, why not? You're not throwing him into a title situation. You're going to give him experience of pushing a car forward and developing and trying to make your way through the midfield. It could be a good learning ground for him. Again, they are solid. They are a sort of solidly midfield team, the kind of team you'd expect to put an up and coming superstar rookie. So I don't see why not.
I suppose as well, for the obvious reasons, it'll depend on Fernando Alonso, but also if Alonso stays, why not put Norris in? Because you're not going to find many better drivers on the grid for a Norris to learn from. But then if Alonso leaves, you don't really want to partner Van Dorn and Norris, because there's no experience there, is there?
No, and the good thing about having Alonso, if you bring in a rookie next to Alonso, you can at least have a sense of what level that rookie's at. If you put Norris next to Van Dorn, it might be tricky to figure out exactly how good Norris is, how good Van Dorn is.
A few people asking about Hamilton and a penalty. I've still seen absolutely nothing. I don't know if you two have seen anything on Twitter yet confirming either way. As far as I can see, there's nothing.
No, I haven't seen anything. The only other thing related to it I've seen was that Brundle has tweeted. Some people mentioned it in the chat, saying that Hamilton was being told on the radio to push like crazy all the way to the line, even out the last corner, to get as big a gap as possible, just in case.
Okay, so they're suspecting possibly something then, aren't they?
It's probably just covering all the bases, just in case. I think it's unlikely now, looking at all the things we have regarding the rules. So it's difficult.
Right, I'm going to take two more questions from chat because we are overrunning by a full 2 minutes, which, believe me, Stuart, I can promise you is not the worst we've done. I think the worst overrun we've had is 35 minutes. It all comes down to what chat's like, and they're quite active tonight, but obviously we've been live big time today. 3.5 hours in total is going to work out at, so don't want to go too crazy. PC can't handle it, and it's very warm today. So a couple of people asking, just while I'm looking for other questions, if you two want to answer, whether it'll be Russell or Norris to win the F2 Championship this year.
I'm just going to say I can't really answer this because I haven't been following it closely enough. So, Jonty.
I got the feeling Russell's going to take it. He seemed to have a little bit of trouble getting used to the car right at the start of the season, whereas Norris was quick immediately. But Russell has just been on fire since, and is almost untouchable out the front.
Yeah. I'd probably say Russell, if I'm picking, to be honest. We were discussing this the other day, actually. Was it on a stream about Norris and Russell? It might have been. I kind of think Norris is a little bit like we've got in F1 with another two drivers, probably the quicker driver, but I feel like Russell is the more rounded driver, a bit more of... You could probably put him in an F1 car and he'd do all right, whereas Norris, I think there'd be some mistakes, not to criticise him, but just because he is a very aggressive driver, if that makes sense. So I'd probably say Russell for the F2 win this year, but I'm absolutely loving that championship. It's brilliant. I highly recommend you watch it, Stuart. It's great racing and it's good fun as well.
Yeah, I do. I've been trying to watch it more frequently. I do watch some races, but yeah, I really need to just go full on into it at some point.
I mean, it's worth watching. Sorry to sound like a fanboy to people in chat, but it's worth watching just for Markelov. If you think Ricciardo can pull a dive bomb, you've seen nothing compared to what Markelov pulls off.
Overtaking Monaco. I'll never forget. That was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Good question here from Paris Precious 21. Says, will Danny Rick be more likely to leave Red Bull Racing now, Jonty?
No, he's smart enough to know that it's purely mechanical, and there's no bias or anything in the team that leads to that.
What about you, Stuart?
He's found himself in a very tricky position now because he's sort of the last of the big people to sign. Obviously, we're waiting on that second Ferrari seat, but I think it's either going to be Raikkonen or Leclerc. I don't see that going anywhere else. So I don't think Ricciardo would risk jumping down the order. We've seen how big a gap it is to the next teams. There's a big question mark over Honda, but I think it's worth him at least staying a couple of years to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, I think as well, where does he go? Really, the only, I suppose, viable option would be Renault. They're probably the closest to Red Bull, maybe Haas, but I can't see him going to Haas, but possibly Renault. But if he goes to Renault and Honda turn up with a belting engine next year and Red Bull is suddenly right up there, he's going to look pretty daft, isn't he? So it's a difficult one for him. He's kind of got himself in no man's land, but I've been saying for a while now, I fully expect him to stay at Red Bull next season. Final question, it will be a quick fire one. I don't want to do any more on Ferrucci. We've talked about him loads this week and I've had a right rant on him and I've been quite rightly so horrible, I think, at times about him, if I've been totally blunt about it, but totally deserves that criticism. But one question to see, which I don't think we've answered before actually, is Williams a good option? Is Honda a good option for Williams going forward? Obviously they're at Red Bull next year now, Jonty, so they can build around them, but had that deal not gone through, a works deal with Honda could have been a really good move for Williams.
Yeah, it could have been, because in some ways, because they will have that works investment, access to more resources through that deal. But can they afford to lose the significance of the Mercedes power? That's the big balancing factor.
I suppose in a lot of ways, Stuart, that's the only thing keeping them even remotely competitive, isn't it? Is that Mercedes engine at the moment?
Yeah, certainly to an extent, but that engine does not hold the power over the other teams that it used to. If you look at the non-works Mercedes teams, they're behind the Ferrari teams. They're behind the Renault teams, pretty much. They're not, and Honda has this massive question mark over it. What are they going to be like next year? What are they going to be like in 2020? When are they going to have their massive Mercedes 2014 moment that we're all waiting for?
Yeah. You're right on the Mercedes thing. They've definitely lost that dominance that they had, haven't they? And Ferrari appear to have the edge now, so it's going to be interesting. Just one keeps cropping up. Sean, you have to answer Vettel 2011 or Hamilton 2015. Yeah, I'm not going to answer. I can't answer that because I think both drivers had bloody good seasons those two round, and Hamilton was pretty dominant 2015 from what I remember, and Vettel blew everybody away in 2011. So I'd take either, quite frankly, although I'm sure Jonty, who's coming in here, will probably have an answer.
Oh, I've got a really easy answer for this. I would take the 2011 Red Bull over the 2015 Mercedes.
Okay. Is that just because of the noise it makes?
No. Just, it's a way of getting around the whole driver thing.
You want to have a say on that one, Stuart, or are you going to avoid it like I have? Dodge that bullet.
They both were. See, the problem with both of those options is that my immediate thoughts are just how annoying they were in their dominance. Like, as much as I respect a driver who can dominate a season, I just end up just starting to hate them a little bit and just hoping anyone takes them down. I think I'd take Vettel. I can't give you a really good answer why, though. That's my instinct.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's a good point to end on. At least you made a decision. I just bottled it, as I always do when it comes to those. But thank you very much, Stuart, for coming and joining us for this one. Hopefully we'll be able to get you on again in future. Really enjoyed having you on, and great to get another opinion on here as well.
Yeah, it's been really good fun. Thanks for having me. I hope you chat people enjoyed it.
Chat people, I like you chat people, brilliant. And as ever, Jonty, thank you very much, not just for this, but for the race watch along as well. That's 3.5 hours of my gob. I don't quite know if you've coped, mate, to be honest.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a sweaty ear, but I can cope with it. It's been fun.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much to both of you, and I'm sure I'll talk to you again very soon.
Yes,
Cheers.
you very well, very much so. See you later, guys.
Cheers.
Once again, thank you very much to Jonty and for Stuart for joining us. Obviously, Stuart's debut as well on stream. Hopefully, we'll get him on again in future. By the way, patrons, if you're watching this now, I haven't updated that. I've just had so much to do this weekend. I will get your new names on there before the next stream. Thank you to you guys for turning out, not only for the race debrief, but also for the race watch along. Absolutely loved that. It was cheesy as hell, but we had a lot of fun, and I know a lot of you enjoyed that, so thank you for that as well. And of course, for the race debrief, I will be back tomorrow with the German Grand Prix review, a full look at everything with a lot of graphics and a bit more in-depth chat from me. Just my mouth again. I'm sure you all love it, really. Until then, though, of course, you can follow me on social media. Links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and to Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.